Good afternoon to our viewers in Germany and across Europe, and good morning to our viewers in the United States. I'm Steve Sokol, the president of the American Council on Germany, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 7th discussion in our virtual series, State to State, German-American State Legislator Dialogue. I know I speak for my colleagues here at the ACG when I say that we're very, very happy to continue this collaboration with the Aspen Institute Germany. The State to State series provides a platform for very important subnational exchanges and in-depth discussions among German and American state legislators and a broader audience on common issues affecting the transatlantic community. Both of our organizations have recognized the increasing role of subnational actors such as states, communities, and cities in addressing issues and believe it's critical to engage decision makers and opinion leaders at the state and local level. Both ACG and Aspen have also been working on projects in the field of agricultural policy, resource scarcity, and food security. For nearly 40 years, the ACG has actually organized exchanges between farmers, ranchers, and policy experts to look at various facets of agriculture. And as a matter of fact, one of our guests today just returned from a week-long trip to Germany to meet with policymakers and practitioners to discuss best practices in farming, as well as German, European, and US agricultural policy. I, for one, am very much looking forward to today's discussion, and we're very excited that you could join us today. I'm delighted now to turn things over to Stormy Miltner, the director of the Aspen Institute Germany, who will moderate today's discussion. But before I do, Stormy, a big thanks to you and to your colleagues at Aspen for working with us to make this possible. So with that, Stormy, over to you.
Well, Steve, thank you so much. The pleasure is always on our side. And thank you so much to you and your colleagues for cooperating on this very important initiative. As Steve said, we've been working on, both of our organizations have been working on agriculture issues for quite a while. And we are just starting a new initiative at the Aspen Institute in Germany, which is the Future Forum Agriculture, where we want to bring farmers together to talk about future issues in a structured way. So for both of our organizations, we are transatlantic. We look at the federal level, we look at the state level, and we look at the sub-state level to deal with the big challenges of today. And today we want to talk about agriculture and food security. And as we all know, that is a topic of huge importance to our economies, to our societies, for the environment and our planet. Agriculture can contribute massively to protecting natural resources, to preserving biodiversity, mitigating climate change, and also obviously ensuring global food security. And it also plays and can play a very positive role in social cohesion and rural development. But on the other side, the agricultural sector, and that's also what we all know, is facing huge challenges because of climate change, because of water shortage, because of more severe weather patterns, but also because people are leaving rural areas to move to more urban areas, because of a lack of young people being interested to work in the agricultural sector. So there are huge domestic challenges which both sides of the Atlantic are facing, maybe in different degrees, but they appear very similar. And recently, new challenges have added to this, especially Russia's war on Ukraine, the geopolitical frictions in the world, disruptions of supply chains for important inputs for the agricultural sector, protectionism, export controls. So while this is an area of huge potential, it is also an area of, I would say, huge challenges. And this is what we want to discuss today with representatives from both sides of the Atlantic. Before I introduce our 4 speakers and panelists, I also would like to remind our audience, although Steve had already said so in the beginning, I still want to do it again, how you can contribute and participate in our dialogue. You can, throughout the whole process, you can write questions and comments in our Q&A and in the function. And I will then read that out and bring it into the discussion. But we will also have a section in our event today when you can raise your electronic hand. You by now all know where to find it, and raise your electronic hand, and then I will call on you. We cannot call on you visually, but we can call on you via audio. So jump in and tell us what you think, what you are worried about, and also about solutions. So let me introduce our panelists of today, and a big thank you to all of them, because they have a very busy schedule, legislative schedule, and they freed up the time to be here today. So thank you very much. On the German side, let me welcome Elrid Pasbrig, who is a member of the Social Democratic Party in the State Parliament of Saxony-Anhalt. And she is Deputy Chairwoman of the Committee for Agriculture, Food and Forestry, and spokesperson for Agriculture, Animal Welfare, and Petitions for the SPD Parliamentary Group. And if we did our research correctly, I found out that she was raised on a farm in a rural area, and bringing in her interest in agriculture already from a very young age, and it has followed you throughout your whole career. So thank you so much, Elrid, for being here today. It is also a great pleasure from the other side of the Atlantic, from the United States, to welcome Representative Sydney Carlin from Kansas, who is a Democrat in the Kansas House of Representatives. And she is a ranking minority member of both the Kansas House Committee on Agriculture and the House Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources budget. And we are also joined by Senator Russ Goodman, who is a member of the Republican Party in the Georgia State Senate. And he serves as the secretary for the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Consumer Affairs, and is a 7th generation South Georgia farmer. And entrepreneur, and with a big passion, as I read and heard, for agriculture and rural Georgia. So welcome to both of you. It's wonderful to have you. And last but not least, let me also welcome our 3rd U.S. state legislator, Assemblywoman Donna Lupardo, who is a Democrat in the New York State Assembly. She is a chair of the Assembly Committee on Agriculture and serves on the National Conference of State Legislatures Agricultural Task Force. And we want to know all about what that is, and if that is something which we also have something similar we have in Germany, or we should have. So thank you so much to all of you for being here today. What I would like to kick us off with is a question to all 4 of you. If you had to do a ranking of the biggest challenges for the agricultural sector and for rural areas, what would be the two biggest challenges in that field? And I would love to start with Donna, if I may.
Well, thanks again for having us. It's certainly a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to having this type of dialogue and building relationships going forward. You pretty much outlined the gamut of issues that we're dealing with. It's difficult to narrow in on a couple, but in New York State, labor is probably our biggest issue. We have labor shortages due to a variety of factors. The agricultural work is difficult. It's not really attractive to a lot of people. We have a failure, an enormous failure at the federal level for my opinion, for immigration reform. That would make this a lot easier for us. New York State has also put in place some wage mandates, which is putting pressure on our farmers. Again, the federal level, we're working with wage laws regarding agricultural workers that haven't been changed in decades. So we've got pressures on our farmers from purely a labor standpoint, to getting the work done. And I would say our other major issue, of course, is climate. It is so completely unpredictable out there. Early rains, frosts that we're not expecting, droughts. It's, in upstate New York, we had a fairly stable climate, and now that has really been tossed. We're spending a lot of effort right now on hardening and climate resiliency to assist our farmers. But as our conversation proceeds, I'm certain that we'll have opportunity to talk about the silver lining that came along with the pandemic, which has highlighted the importance of our farming community and the agricultural economy in general. Certainly, our colleagues in New York City are far more tuned in to the value of and the vulnerability of our farmers and the work they do. So I'll look forward to going on about that a little further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna, for kicking us off. I noted the labor issues, which we will definitely come back to. And I would love to hear a little bit more later on what you meant when you said wages and wage laws. And I'm sure you can explain that a little bit more. Let's jump onto the other side of the Atlantic. Elrid, did it resonate with you, what we just heard, or do you have other challenges in mind?
First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a good possibility to get into exchange with you. And for us, it's the same as Donna just said, that the top challenge for us is climate change. And indeed, since years, we have much too hot summers, and we don't have any rain here. So we have to adapt to this new situation. But we will, when our discussion goes on, we will step into it more deeply, I guess. And the second challenge I would outline here is that our farmers have to adjust to the political restrictions that we have from the Common Agricultural Policy. For example, the required reduction of using fertilizers. Maybe you have experiences with that, but this is the second big problem we have here.
Thank you so much for also reminding us that on our side of the Atlantic, it's more like a multi-level game, huh? I mean, we also have the European level in there, which sets regulation standards. Makes it not always easier, but we will come back to that as well in a second. Russ, what would you say? What are the biggest challenges?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me. I just got back from Germany about a week ago, and I can't thank the German people enough and the American Council on Germany. It really broadened my horizons, and I will tell you that farmers are the same everywhere. The accents or languages may be different, but I think that farmers share a lot of common similarities. I grew up growing peanuts, cotton, and tobacco. My family's been farming in South Georgia for about 200 years. I now grow blueberries and pecans and pine trees. I would say this, blueberries in the part of Georgia that I represent is close to $1 billion industry now. And so for us and for the farmers in my area, trade is a very big issue because the American government, we set regulations and standards in terms of environmental standards, emission standards, labor standards, and everything else that we expect our farmers to grow their products under. But yet we're not doing a very good job of protecting our farmers from trade with countries that do not grow their products under the same set of standards. And so that's been an issue for us. In 2010, Mexico shipped in 1.8 million pounds of blueberries in the United States. And last year, I think it was something like 63 million pounds. And so That's an issue. Another issue is the ever decreasing farmers' share of the American food dollar. Consolidation in the ag sector is a huge issue. Every industry that the farmer buys from and every industry that the farmer sells to is consolidated. And that's played a part, I think, in the farmers' ever decreasing share of the American food dollar. So I would say that. I would say long term, the farmers' every decreasing share of the American food dollar in trade in our part of the world. Obviously, climate change is playing an issue as well. One of the things that I learned in Germany when we met with the crop insurance folks that we met with, that I think you all do a better job of than we do in terms of crop insurance. Normally, we will have a frost event about once out of every 10 years. And in the last 7 years, we've had 3 frost events. And so in Germany, you all insure whatever the value of that crop is. But in the United States, the farmer's working on a 7-year average of what his yields are. And so those 3 years that we had freezes decreases our base. And so I think you all do a better job in terms of that than we do. And that's one of the things that I think we need to be working on in the United States as these frost events happen with more regularity. That we need to maybe follow suit with what our friends in Germany are doing in terms of crop insurance.
Thank you so much, Russ. I noted down all these issues and we come back to them as well. I have a very important question though to ask you in between. Is it pecan pie or is it pecan pie?
Well, what the farmers in Georgia will tell you is that if they're cheap, they're pecans. And if they're bringing a high price, they're pecans.
Ah, good point. And over to you, Sydney. What do you think are the biggest challenges?
We have really struggled with water issues, and it's political as well as actual water needs. All of our water supplies from Colorado and Nebraska have been affected by the droughts and the lack of snow in Colorado. Western Kansas depends a lot on the Colorado River. So we've had a lot of water issues, and we've had for every year we have water conferences and we come up with good ideas, but we cannot get past the legislature. We can't get past the lobbyists. And farmers, I understand, and I was raised on a very small farm, but we didn't have irrigation, nor did we need it. But irrigation issues, we have a first in line, you get the most water if you've been there the longest, whatever, it's first in time, first in right or something policy. And we're trying to modify that. And we have had some success by forming what we call LIMAs, which is organizations of the community, to offer themselves to a contract with each other that they can use what they need and share and bank water usage. That is helping. But and we're starting to do things like restore into our aquifer, actually push the water back in when we have water to put in through cleaning up water and putting it back in. It's a process that I know little about, that just heard it at the last conference, and that's as much as I can really say right now about it. The other thing, our farmers are having a difficult time with fertilizer production. It's not available. It's very costly. I have 80 acres and, I don't farm it, but I pay the bills, and the cost has gone up, but it's just hard. Statewide, we're concerned about the availability of fertilizers. Of course, we have climate issues. We've had a lot of range fires in the last few years. We've lost thousands. One fire, we lost 7,000 head of cattle, which was huge. And then we had a big heat wave this summer. We lost 2,000 head of cattle in a feedlot that the temperature just got too high, too fast, and they were standing on a concrete bed, and they had come from another climate into Kansas, and they reacted by dying. So we've had some losses that were just heat related, fire related, climate related. It's a pretty conservative state. Most of the time I'm not getting anywhere with trying to solve climate issues. We're climate deniers, which is very sad, although we are working on it.
Thank you very, very much, and also sharing these really terrible examples. All of you identified climate issues as one big issue. We also heard about labor issues. We heard about trade issues, also availability of fertilizer. Maybe we stay a little bit with the climate issue. And we know that it's not just raising temperatures, but it's also the severe weather events, it's fires, it's heat, it's unpredictability, it's Donna mentioned early cold temperatures, and I think Russ, you also mentioned that can be a problem. What are state legislators doing about this? Are there regulations coming up? Are there laws coming up? How are you trying to help farmers to get to adjust? And I would love to start with Elrid this time. What are we doing on our side of the Atlantic?
First of all, we have to change our water law. You know, in the moment, we have to let our water flow away completely in cases of floods and of rains and snow. In the last years, it has been that in winter and spring, we had a lot of snow and a lot of rain. So actually, there would have been a lot of water that we could have retained, but we were not allowed to. We had to just let it flow away, and it was not available for our farmers when they needed it. So now we change our water law so that in future it will be possible to retain water and to use it when it is needed. We are quite optimistic about it, that it would change our situation for our farmers. And another support we have to give would be to install drip irrigation. There's a lot of, we are just looking around during Europe and having a look at Spain and France, because there it is, the drip irrigation is applied, and so we need to know more about it, how to apply it, and then of course we should fund it so that it's getting into practice here in Saxony-Anhalt.
Thank you so much. So water seems to be a big issue everywhere, and it doesn't come automatically. How to use it in a good way. And Sydney, you also mentioned water rights and those who are upstream, downstream, who have the oldest water rights. That seems to be a big problem in your state as well.
Yes, it is. With well, of course, like I talked about the rivers coming in from other states have maybe blocked. We've had lawsuits, blocked the water, given us gray water instead of real water, and so we've had some issues over the years with that. We do use drip irrigation, and we do have that is being used here. We've also done. I'm sorry, Stormy, I'm not sure if I'm on your question, but we also are doing a lot of mitigating the soil through planting crops that we leave in the ground to deteriorate. I don't know what we call it. Somebody knows. But beets, turnips, those kind of crops that enrich and hold the soil, the moisture in the soil. So we've got some things going there, but just trying to encourage people to use less water in their farming is really important, because the communities that depend on that water for people to live are often threatened. I mean, in the United States, you know, you look at Phoenix and the South, the big population centers that depend on the water. I know in California, I have a house out there that is threatened by fire every year in the mountains, and then also the snow is not coming in like it has been, and so we're not sending water downstream to Reno, Nevada, and places. So it is climate change, and we're not doing enough. I wish I were a better expert on it. I am not, because I have not felt. We did restrict coal plants because of the air quality. We didn't allow one to be built about 10 years ago, and it was quite a battle. We are using nuclear energy, and we're looking at a lot of wind. We have a lot of wind, and we're building a lot more wind and encouraging solar. So those things are, I know, going to help us. I think did I answer your question at all?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, also bringing in those cases and what you're doing, that's perfect. Bringing in the soil quality, talking about drip irrigation, and also moisture capturing in the ground. Russ, my blueberry plants all died this year because they didn't get any water, or not enough water. How are you in your state, how are you regulating water usage, and what are you doing about supporting farmers to enhance soil quality and moisture capture in the soil?
Well, on our farm, we use drip irrigation for both fertigation and for irrigation. And you know, I apologize. I come at this from a little bit different point of view, but you know, I would hope that you would want me to, I guess, for better understanding, I guess, to understand how farmers in my part of the world feel about it. I'm not a climate denier, but we all live on the same planet. And when I was speaking with German farmers, they, I think, sort of felt the same way about this, where today you have 1.8% of the population is farming and 98.2% are not farming. And so I think that creates a disconnect. But for instance, let me put it this way. We're in the timber business. The tractor that we've been planting trees with for 40 years, we cannot buy it in this country anymore. But they still build that country 10 miles across the border in Mexico and ship it all over the world. And it's a tier 3 engine, and we have to have tier 4 engines. And so for frost protection, we now have to buy tier 4 engines for frost protection. Well, we only use those engines about 10 nights a year when we're, as you say, in Germany, sprinkling for frost protection. But yet those engines are under the same emission standards as a semi that's putting 200,000 miles a year on the interstate. And so I think in terms of how farmers in my part of the country feel, water is not a huge issue because we're close to Okefenokee Swamp. We have been in ongoing litigation between Tennessee and Florida with water wars over there. We have a moratorium in Southwest Georgia on putting in new wells. But we've also, in terms of, you know, we're putting in a lot of solar in Georgia, and that's created a lot of concern too, because you know, I know in Southwest Georgia there's been 8,000 acres of farmland that's been converted to solar. But I think in my part of the world, one of the biggest concerns with farmers is that, and honestly, this is my opinion as well, is if we truly care about the environment and we want to put these regulations on American farmers, why are we not protecting them from countries who are not? Because there's a huge cost involved with that, right? There's a huge cost involved with just labor And I was talking with German farmers, and they deal with some of the same deals in terms of where you get a lot of your fruits and vegetables from. And so fertilizer is a huge issue. I've been really sounding the alarm on that. I believe it's 67.11% of the world's ammonium nitrate comes from Russia. One of the things we found out as well throughout this pandemic is a lot of the same companies that make our medicines are now based in China. And those same companies are also in the plant protection product industry. You know, if we didn't have plant protection products, our yields would probably be 25% of what they are today. And so, in my perspective, and certainly I know, you know, I very much respect everyone's different perspective about things. But in terms for farmers in Georgia, I don't know how, you know, how we can say we're going to me, I just don't see if we are going to require farmers, and we recognize that climate change is an issue, but yet we're going to make those same farmers who are growing things under the regulations that our country puts on them, we're going to make them have to compete on a level playing field with countries that are not doing that. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about food security, I think that's going to end up exporting our agricultural industry to countries that don't follow those same set of guidelines. That's my perspective. I always tell people that I tell them what I believe to be the truth, but I recognize that people have different ideas about what the truth is. So anyway, that's kind of my perspective.
No, thank you so much. And I want to come back to the trade issue in a second, and also talk about subsidies and tariffs and what you would say would be a good mix or is not a good mix. But I also wanted to bring in Donna and to ask you what your state legislature is doing with regard to agriculture and climate change.
Well, New York State has very aggressive climate goals, and we're very sensitive to not putting mandates on, to the point Senator just made, not mandating our farmers go in one particular direction. We have recently, I passed a bill called the Soil Health and Climate Resiliency Act, which stands up a lot of resources we're making available to our farmers who would like to learn more about ways to protect their soil through reducing tillage and cover crops and soil crop rotation and that sort of thing. Cornell University, which is one of the major land grant universities and one of the top schools in the world, has committed themselves to educating our farmers, those who would like to get involved. And we find that farmers are very open to it and interested in, so long as we can help them stand up some of these some of these changes that they need to make. We certainly can't require them to do it and then not provide them the adequate resources. I must say that there is a tension growing between our aggressive climate goals and land pressures. I'm very worried about protecting prime farmland from solar development, for example. And I'm interested in pursuing a policy where we can hopefully make some determinations to where we're going to place these developments for our clean energy standards. So we have some sort of tension developing here. We support farmers' rights, of course, to do with their land as they wish. It's just that due to pressures from labor and all the rest of it, it's becoming unsustainable for them to farm. So we're stuck in a bit of a catch-22 here at the moment. Aggressive climate goals, helping our farmers, improve their sustainability, but at the same time, some of them are saying, hey, you need our land to meet your other goals for clean energy. So it's complicated.
Yeah, it's there are certainly some trade-offs and things which are hard to reconcile. Elrid, is that also an issue in Germany, that there are conflicting interests with regard to renewable energy production and farmland usage?
Oh yes, there is. But we have a commitment that we say agricultural land should be agriculturally engaged. First of all, we want to produce food on our agricultural land, and we really have to take care that the land is not it's not sold to other investors. Of course, we have a pressure for much more renewable energy. So we need more solar energy and more wind energy, of course. But we have identified land that is, how do you call it? It is not as good as we have these Bodenpunkte, Stormy. Maybe you can help me. You know, we have low quality land that you can use for building up energy parks, but the agricultural land should be saved in the hand of farmers. So, and now we have the discussion here in Saxony-Anhalt of the we have to or we want to find an agricultural structure law that says or that brings more transparency into the land market, and that avoids concentration, that one owner has all the land in one region. So for now, we don't have a solution for formulating this law, but we are discussing it in Parliament. And we have a state company that is allowed to buy land when there is someone who wants to buy land and we don't know whether he really is farming on it. So we can just control land sales. I hope you know what I mean with it. So this is how we can control where owns land. And the next question is that we want to, as I said, that we want to avoid concentration. But you probably know that we have in the new lender, we have the situation that we have these big cooperatives that are working here. So they own a lot of land in the regions. So we don't want to destroy them. We want them that they can work further on. But you know, we have those startups or single farmers who are not getting who cannot afford the land. So that's why we have to look that everybody can buy land or rent land if he wants to, and if he wants to get into farming. This is a big question.
No, thank you so much. We have two questions coming in the Q&As. One is by Bettina Rudloff on transatlantic trade, agriculture conflicts, and we come back to that in a second. The second one is by Anna Keeley, and she is asking about labor issues. And I would love to now also come to the issue of labor, to labor issues. And we heard from Donna that it is really not that easy to get good labor, skilled labor for the agricultural sector, but also maybe unskilled labor, that migration laws are not always so helpful. And Anna is asking, what is the proportion of the unskilled and highly skilled workers employed in agriculture? And what is the level of robotization, digitalization in the US and in EU farming? Maybe Russ, you can first come in, and then also Sydney, and then again Donna and Elrid.
Sure. In the blueberry world, we're we're working as hard as we can to get varieties that we can machine harvest. We have 4 machines on our farm. We're not quite where we want to be yet, but we hope that that we'll be there in the next 5 to 10 years. Robotics are becoming more common in packing facilities. One of the problems that we've got in Georgia, and I'm sure it's this way all across the country, in 2008, the workforce participation rate in the state of Georgia was 68%, and today it's 62%. And so Georgia has 10.7 million people, and so you take close to 700,000 people that were in the workforce in 2008 that aren't today, and it's creating issues. We have issues with trying to use the H-2A program That's what we have to use to try to get our crops harvested. And then the prevailing wages, I forget, our prevailing wage just went up to close to another $2. And we've got a bit of a blueprint of what's happened in the past. When NAFTA was enacted in 1994, there were 228 tomato farmers in the state of Florida, and today there's less than 20. And so that kind of stuff is concerning to me. I think what most farmers feel is we just want a level playing field. That's what we really want, because on a farm, especially a produce farm, labor can be 40 or 50% of your cost. And if you're competing with someone who has a cost that's 1/10 of what yours is in terms of labor, I don't know how they don't end up putting the farmer whose labor cost is 10 times as much out of business. And so I think that's the big issue with us in terms of labor is how do we make it fair to the American farmer? Or are we going to say that, even if in states like Arizona, there's a huge industry in Arizona right there at the border where farmers are farming in Mexico and then coming right across the border and packaging those products in the United States. And we have our own issues here as well, whether you've got out in California, there are a lot of farmers that have gone down into Mexico and that are farming. The problem that it creates is the produce industry has gotten to be huge in Mexico. And then you've got the Midwestern corn and soybean lobby, who obviously exports are a huge part of their success. And so it creates a little bit of a divide on what we want to see happen, because they're worried about if we impose some kind of, and listen, I led an effort, or was part of leading an effort, where we raised $2 million to carry a case in front of the International Trade Commission. I went up and testified in Washington. I mean, I've been working on this for a long time, and I don't know if I'm getting off subject here, but if there's one thing that I can say that most American farmers feel is that we want a level playing field. On the flip side of that, we also we're dealing in a world today in terms of consolidation, where in the United States, you now have 4 corporations that process 85% of the beef in this country. That's not a good thing for rural America. And honestly, I don't think it's a good thing for food security. We saw that throughout COVID, where, it's the same thing with baby formula. When we had baby formula shortages in this country, and there were a lot of political stuff that got thrown out about that. And, I don't know if those 2 children that passed away, if it came from that plant. I don't know if the FDA, should have shut them down, or if they didn't get them, or if they got them up going fast enough. I don't know any of that. But I do know that the root cause of that problem is you now have 3 corporations that produce virtually all the baby formula that's consumed in the United States. And so that's concerning to me for food security, what consolidation is doing.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Handing it over to Sydney and throwing in another question which just came in, also on labor though. And Bettina is also asking if there are young people working in the farm sector, agriculture sector, and if there is a way, if there are any programs which try to attract young people to go into agriculture.
That's a good question for me to speak to, just because recently I have noticed how many young couples are farming in my community, my area. And we do take a lot of tours around the state, and in Kansas, we are seeing more young people in farming than I dreamed we would see. Now, I don't know what the numbers are, but to see them actually there doing the work, and partly because the technology has allowed them to do a lot of the social things, communicate with people better. They don't feel so isolated, perhaps, but they are going home to the farms. The baby boomers are kicking off and retiring, and those kids have to come home, or those farms will be corporate. It's interesting. After COVID, we saw a lot of change in what was some point you made, Russ? I'm sorry, I've lost that thought, but COVID did change how we do things. And I think in many ways it was just a turning point that was coming. And we're going to see the changes in the future. I just toured a large farm in Western Kansas. They had 26 people employed. I believe the acreage was 40,000 acres. They have 4 semi trucks, 4 tractors with 12-foot wide equipment on the front that they have blades that they change from one thing to another to do the work. We're doing a lot of no-till farming too. I think that's something that probably you're all doing, I don't know. But with 26 people and in the room, in the bunkhouse, basically, was all the monitors, and they were monitoring the fields constantly. They're sending drones out to see if fields are dry, if they're getting enough fertilizer, and they're doing mediation in spots instead of doing a whole field at one time to conserve water, energy, and cost. So I think the farming industry in Kansas has really stepped up, and it's been pretty exciting. I was on a call with SARL, the international, do you know SARL? I'm not sure what it all stands for, but an international organization of farmers, and I attend their conference occasionally, and was on a board call the other day with them. They were concerned, one of the members was very concerned about cattle coming into the country from Canada, flooding the market for beef up in his area. It must have been North Dakota, I believe. But anyway, so their people are, we're fighting those same issues that Russ is saying, the influx of goods. And yet without trade, where do we don't. Was also on a call with former Ag Secretary Dan Glickman and former Ag Secretary from Nebraska. I can't remember his name. I remember the Kansas guy. But they were talking about how we cannot shut down our borders. We do need to trade. So when it starts to we're getting too many blueberries in the south from Mexico and too many cattle from the north, I don't know what the answer to that is. I know we all want to keep food costs down. The United States has done a wonderful job of keeping food costs down. And my dad used to pour out milk because he wasn't getting the price he needed for milk. There were days. And, so I understand that we need to pay for what we have. And I understand we need to trade with other countries, and understand that it might not seem fair when you're competing. And the labor issue is a huge one. It hasn't been as much a problem in Kansas for farming, but right now everybody's looking for people to go to work with them. One of the things that we talked about, the land, I believe is Donna or Elrid, I'm not sure who was talking, I think it's Donna, but we do have conservation easements. A lot of farming, we have protected farms from wind or solar energy by doing, the farms are going into conservation easements. The governor in 2003 put a huge patch of land into a conservation area to protect from wind farms. So it's just to protect our natural grass prairie. Government can do some things, but it's hard to figure out which things. I'm listening.
Yeah, which things? Donna, let me bring in you, because in your labor issues were one of the big challenges you mentioned in the beginning. What can state legislators do about that?
A lot of different threads going on here. Let me talk about a couple of things we're doing to attract young farmers. We just instituted, or we're just putting more money behind a bill that I recently passed, creating a young farmers loan forgiveness program. So we're helping them, to help with their college expenses. We also have a very successful program called Farmland for a New Generation. And we have navigators throughout the state who are helping match farmers who want to retire with new farmers. And it's kind of like a dating program for people who want to get into farming, but it's been very successful in creating these matches. We're also finding, as far as new farmers, they're very interested in some of the new commodity crops that we've recently seen spikes in, hops. Once we changed all our old Prohibition era beverage laws, we have a lot more people wanting to grow for grain for spirits and hops for beer, and getting into our wine industry as well. Not to mention the work we've done on industrial hemp, and now with the legalization of cannabis. So there's a lot more interest in certain types of crops that are coming along. But I do find some hope in the Navigator program in really helping people, into making those links. Back on the labor issue, you had a question about the wage mandates. In New York State, several years ago, against my objection, we passed a bill requiring overtime be paid after 60 hours of work. And that was recently just changed to phase that into 40 hours. After 40 hours, overtime would have to be paid for workers, and that would be phased in over the next 10 years, I believe. I'm certainly supportive of the concept. It's just to take New York and it puts us at a regional disadvantage with all of the states that are surrounding us, not to mention all the pressures that Senator has talked about with costs. So what the governor and my colleagues have done, and I helped negotiate this, is we're going to be paying the farmers the difference through a tax credit. How sustainable that is a mystery to me. But it does seem like unless we overhaul the way the whole system operates, to adjust this one piece makes things very stressful for our farmers. So back to the young people, I do see a real interest developing. And to the point on water, we have plenty of that in New York State. That's the one thing we don't have to worry about. That's it. One thing.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I also looked up some numbers, and I found that only 11% of all farms in the EU are run by farmers under the age of 40. And in the United States, according to the census, it's only 9% of American farmers are aged 35 or younger. So there seems to be a big need to bring in young farmers. I also want to bring in Bettina, who wanted to talk a little bit about the transatlantic trade conflicts. And I want to bring her in via our audio. Bettina, are you still there? Would you like to join us and ask your first question with regard to the conflicts? I can
you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good evening to everybody. Hi, Stormy. We know each other. We were former colleagues. So Bettina Rudloff, I'm working at the German Institute of International Security Affairs. I'm agriculture engineer and economist. So I used to work as well on a farm. That was a nice obligation during the studying. So my question is more, let's say, on the how to say broader political issues. So thinking about the Russian aggressive war against Ukraine, and we all know what that meant for the markets, especially on cereals. Here in Germany, and maybe as well in other European member states, there was a huge debate on, we picked upon that a bit already, scarce land, and what is the, let's say, ethical and maybe economical most sensible use of the scarce land. So the whole conflict between food, feed, fuel, and ecological issues. And even in the EU, there was a postponing of certain ecological relevant set-aside programs, saying, okay, now it's more important to use these area to for production. So my question would be to the US colleagues. Where do you see the most important conflicts regarding this issue, scarce land? What is the best use of this land? One step further, a very sensible issue I know for the US is the agro-fuel issue. And there the question, during G7, where Germany was the lead and US was part as well, there was a huge debate about, could we at least for a limited time period, limit the agro-fuel use. So not to use, in the US case, maize for fuel, but instead to use the land for food. And there could be in the future other price crises where that could be relevant, a flexible adjustment measure. And the US is one of the largest producer of agri-fuel based on maize or on corn. So I know it's sensible. My question is, do you see there, or where are the major hindering factors? One could do a kind of cooperative issue between the EU and the US in times of crisis situations. We kind of a serious NATO, we postpone the use of land for fuel in order to relax markets, in order to support international food security. Where do you see the major hindering factors in the US for that? I know it's tricky. Thank you.
Oh, wow. It's a huge question.
It's a little huge.
Yeah. Who wants to come in first on that one?
May I ask what is SCAR's land?
Yeah.
No, I think what Bettina meant to say is that land is a resource which is endless. I mean, you don't have,
Scarce land.
Scarce, it's a scarce resource, so to say. And you can either grow crops for food, or you can also grow crops for energy production. And if there is a shortage of food and prices are going up for food, and at the same time, especially here in Germany, prices for energy is also going up, and we have a problem with heating now in the winter. What should we do? Should we produce for energy production, or should we produce for food production? How can we reconcile this? Donna, do you want to start?
Look, she's hitting on sort of the $1 million question. And for those of us who are just working it out day by day, we're always trying to do this big dance of this balance. I haven't had the luxury of stepping back and sort of looking at the global picture, which is one of the reasons I was intrigued by joining this conversation, so that New York State and the rest of the states can view ourselves more in the global picture. I find myself getting mired in just these micro land battles, but we haven't really gotten so tied up on agri-fuel because we're not really producing a lot of that here in New York State. And as far as the scarcity of land, we just have an enormous amount of land that has been underutilized. We've had so many farms go out of business that our goal has been trying to get them back online. The tension that I'm finding is that farmers are choosing, to turn over their land to energy projects, which is why I'm intrigued about the approach in Germany, where it was stated earlier, well, we're just protecting our agricultural lands, or trying to come up with a system of prioritizing what we call prime farmland to scrub land, or land that would be better used for these purposes. So that's the sort of thing I'm working on, is trying to come up with a balance, but also opening our lens a little bit to see how we our policies can better align with the rest of the country and in the world.
Russ, you looked like that you were thinking about it very intensely.
Well, yes, ma'am. We don't in Georgia. One of the things we do is we in my district here in Georgia, actually, we have a pellet plant where we cut pine trees. And well, it used to be when they first started out, actually, they were taking about 300 loads a day of what we call roundwood, logs or, whole trees. And they were making pellets. We ship them to Savannah and they go on a barge and go to Europe for wood pellets for heat, and now they're not taking much roundwood at all. They're using really the leftovers, if you want to call it that, the byproducts of the timber industry, the chips and the bark and all that to make these. In terms of using, one of the things with solar, I would like to see. I am concerned about this farmland being converted to solar, and so y'all pardon me, and I know that farmers can complain a lot, and I'm a 7th generation farmer, so obviously I'm pretty good at complaining. But when you look at farming in general, I've got 2 sons. I've got a son that's a freshman at the University of Georgia that's majoring in ag economics, just like I did. And are they going to come home? The average age of a farmer is 60 years old now. And the truth of the matter is, for those that don't farm, we could sell our farm and pay off what we owe and pay the capital gains taxes on it. And if we could take the remainder and put it in something making 4 or 5% interest, we would make more money watching television than we do actually trying to farm and trying to feed the American people. And you can talk to a lot of any American farmer, and they'll tell you the same thing. And so that's one of the things that I think, in order to get people interested in coming back to the farm, you got to change that dynamic, because farming is a hard life. It's a rewarding life, but it's a hard life. But in terms of, ethanol use and corn and all that, I don't know the history behind that. And I know that there's a huge effort in the United States to protect the ethanol industry. I question sometimes if we couldn't do the same thing with switchgrass and other things to be able to make ethanol. I'm certainly no expert on. I know that in the United States, we've got people that are taking switchgrass and using it to create packaging and things like that. But as far as scarce land, in Georgia, we've got a lot of land that's in timber production that could be converted to farmland. And I don't know sometimes if we wouldn't be well served in our state, where if someone's going to put in a 2,000 acre solar farm, that they've got to go somewhere and either mandate them that they clear up timberland and put those solar panels on timberland, or if they're going to put it on farmland, they've got to convert whatever acreage they take out of agricultural production. They've got to go somewhere and buy timberland and put it in agricultural production. That's because at the end of the day, the yield curve is not keeping up with the population curve. And so if we're going to feed the world, we're going to have to have more land in farming, and we certainly don't need to be taking land out of farming,
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing with us your experience. Elrid, maybe the discussion about food versus fuel, or tank versus plate, tank versus teller, is a little bit more intensive in Germany than in the United States.
Yes, it seems so. The first idea when Russia invaded Ukraine, the first idea we had was, oh my God, all the wheat that should be exported from Ukraine to the rest of the world, we don't have it, so it will not be exported this year. So all the other countries should substitute it. This was our idea then, to say, okay, and now we have to prioritize and say food and not tank. But on the other side, we have to switch to renewable energies. And I personally think that the biogas plants we have in Germany, they belong to the energy mixture we want as well. So, and we have to look at what we are feeding those biogas plants. A lot of people who have animals on their farm, they put the slurry into the biogas plants. What I think is okay, and what's coming out of them, we put as fertilizers into the farming again. So it's a circle in what we produce or in what we have our resources now. That's why we should discuss how much green plants belong into biogas plants and how much other products from farming as well. But I have a question as well, because it's that's connected with what we are just discussing. In Germany, we have this dualism between organic farming and conventional farming. And you know, our federal government wants to have 30% of all farming should be organic farming in the future. So the conventional farmers should switch to organic way of farming, or we have to have more organic farmers in this competition. But we also say that the earnings out of that, the harvest, is not as much as we can reach from conventional farming. And so this belongs to this discussion as well. How much food is needed in future to feed the world? That's why I would like to ask you whether this discussion you have as well in America, in the United States, between organic and conventional, and sometimes we say the conventional farming is not healthy enough. That's why we have to switch, or all this what we connotate with it. You know, it's a hard discussion, and I don't want to discuss about it any longer, because I say all the conventional farmers have the potential to be environment friendly as well. They can just put environmental practices or for climate friendly practices as well. That's why I just don't want to speak any longer about the two ways of farming, but it's going on here. So what about you?
That's the best part of a conversation, when the moderator becomes unnecessary anymore, and you engage in a discussion among yourselves. Who wants to jump in?
Yeah, we don't have any mandates. We're certainly encouraging people who want to transition to organic farming. We support our organic farmers organization. I just provided them with funding to streamline their certification process, to help on their web platforms. But we would certainly, I don't think I would be able to get away with putting down a percentage goal at any stretch. Again, our New York farmers, you know, they want to be provided with information, the opportunities, the resources, and then they'll go from there. I certainly understand the value of it. The focus that we also have at Cornell's research labs on precision agriculture, I think, is going a long way to reducing the usage of certain chemicals that people find objectionable on crops. So that's a pretty exciting development, in my view, the precision or the digital agriculture, as you might call it.
Do you want to comment on that one?
Well, I would say organic farming is, well, organic foods are quite the rage. And I personally can't tell the difference. So I would have a hard time with that. I think it's, if it's to use less fertilizer, if it's to keep the water cleaner, if there's some reasons that, like you say, the environmentally friendly things can still occur. One of the things we did recently, and I thought little of it as we did it through committee, but we do have a cleanup plan that the state participates in, the cleanup of spilled fertilizer that's out in fields, and where people, I mean, it seemed a little thing to me, but I have a little farm. So I don't know how big a thing it really was, but to get, to clean up the fertilizer that's been spilled or left behind in fields is a pretty big thing, I guess, especially where water goes in. So that's one of the things that we've been doing. And it's that kind of thing that makes organic farming attractive, I guess. but we also are working on, and I was sick and didn't go to this lecture, but they're trying to take methane from the farms, the beef pens, stockyards, they used to call them, taking that and processing it for fuel. We thought about using it for energy when we were trying to deny the coal plant to be built, and it wasn't ready. We weren't ready, the science wasn't ready, but we're working on that as a way to get more water, separate the water, use the methane for fertilizer, clean up the fields, clean up the stockyards.
Yeah,
I'm impressed by this group and what we're sharing. And I was listening to Russ talk about clearing timber, and my brother was a forester. He passed away a couple years ago, but he was internationally known for going into forest areas. He spent a lot of time in Germany, actually, and South America. And he said, I am one person. Everybody talks about trying to save the rainforest. And he said, I'm someone who can do that. And he went to Pakistan and with the US aid project, and they planted millions of eucalyptus trees for 5 years. And after 5 years, they could cut those from at the bottom and they would grow back. To reforest a country that has no wood, they had no wood for fuel, they had no wood for housing, no wood for anything. And sociologically, he worked with 70 tribes to keep them from letting their people cut that down. So, you know, when you talk about clearing for farming, yes, Georgia has a lot of trees. We don't have those in Kansas, but we have to watch. There's a hydrological cycle there that we have to protect as well. So I understand, and it is opening my eyes to see all of our different points of view and needs as we see them from our communities, and I really appreciate being a part of it. Thank you.
I think there's so much to learn from each other. We are almost at the end. Time went really, really fast. Russ, there was a very nice question though to you by Katja Griesen, and she asked you, because you were just in Germany, and if there was something which surprised you on your visit here, and which you learned and took away home with. And I want to close off our whole discussion with another question to all of you again. And this is the one thing you would recommend your counterparts on the other side of the Atlantic to look at, something to learn from you. What would you recommend? But let me first start with Russ, asking you what was surprising.
Well, it was an amazing trip, and I will tell you, Robin can tell you, she was the person that we really got to be good friends, and she's a great human being. And as she says, I met a lot of cousins up there, because my last has been Americanized. It's Goodman now, but 400 years ago it was Gutmann, and my family was from the Rhineland of Germany. So I'll joke, I had a lot of cousins over there. I want to say one quick thing about organic, and there's one thing I think there's a misconception a little bit about organic, and we've looked at going to organic. One of the problems is are the American people willing to pay the increase in price to justify the cost? But also, a lot of times people think if something's grown organically that it's not sprayed with pesticides. That's not the case. It's just it's sprayed with certified organic pesticides. So that's a lot. Some folks don't realize that. But I think one of the things that I came away from, first off, the German people are amazing people, kind, you know, just great people, and they welcomed us. And but I think one of the things that I came away with is the fact that Germany really doesn't have an energy sector within their borders as far as having the ability to get their own oil and natural gas and that kind of thing. And so it was amazing to me what you all were doing. And obviously with the war in Ukraine, it's created, it's not I mean, honestly, it's not a good situation for you, for your country. I feel for you, because, you know, it just so happens that in America, we happened to get a patch of dirt that had a lot of natural gas, and we've got oil, and and so the way that you're using, we went to one village where the way you were mining your manure from your farms from your hogs and cows, and using that to make methane gas. And we actually saw, for those of y'all that were on the trip, this is amazing, but they're in Georgia, we have our cows in pastures. There they have them in buildings, and they do that so they can capture the manure, and they're using that manure to make methane gas. The methane gas is going to engines that are running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. They have generators hooked to them. And this one village we were at, those two engines from poop basically were supplying electricity to 120 homes, and they were capturing the exhaust from the engines and using the exhaust heat to be able to heat the homes and to heat the water. Now, my curiosity about that is economically, how does that work out in terms of at the end of the day? I know that with what you all are doing, what you're faced with in terms, especially with the war in Ukraine, but that was something was really amazing to me of what you all are doing. I think you all do a better job of diversifying your farms. I mean, every farm I went to had hogs and cows. And I will say this, I've told people since I got home, if we had an EMP device detonated over the United States and one was detonated over Germany, the German people would fare better than the American people would, because you've made a conscientious effort to have a more diversified portfolio on each farm in terms of those communities. And we have allowed ourselves to become more consolidated. And so that was something that impressed me as well. One of the things that I like that you all do as well is, if you're going to buy farmland, you've got to be a farmer. And that's something that farmers are dealing with in this country, where we're having these investment firms that are coming in and buying up these big swaths of farmland, and it's pricing it out for farmers. It's making it difficult to obtain land, and the barriers to entry in agriculture today are worse than they've ever been. So I can get long-winded, and I'll stop now, but I would just say this: I'm really honored to have been able to be on that trip. I'm thankful for the friends that we made. We have so much in common. I look forward to our friends coming to Georgia next year and hosting them. And it was one of the most rewarding trips I've ever been on in my life. So I really appreciate the American Council on Germany for allowing me to go, and for the friendships that I made.
Wow, thank you so much. Those were almost last words, but not quite, because I also want to ask Sydney, Elrid, and Donna, what would be good lessons learned for the other side, or good recommendations?
Well, first of all, I'd like to get involved with those trips. That sounds fantastic. Georgia, Germany. I don't know if I'm going to be able to add something all that profound at this point. I can just tell you that I have learned since the pandemic that the food is a great equalizer in many ways. I was able to use the pandemic to help educate my colleagues in the more New York City and those areas about the need to become more aware and sympathetic to our farmers upstate. It was the surplus food that we purchased from upstate and sent to our downstate food pantries that really began to open people's eyes at the value of what we're doing in our agricultural sector. So I think in general, I find that food and also the commodities that produce different products that people enjoy is a way to build bridges not only between sectors of the state, but among different states and in other countries. So that's sort of my feeling on that.
Thank you so much. And Sydney?
Well, I wish I had the trip to Germany. I did take a couple of trips with groups to Azerbaijan and Turkey, and I really was interested in the farming and the production of their food. But I don't know what's happening really, other than what you've told us today in Germany. I don't know if we could help you with drip irrigation technology. Are you doing no-till farming? Are you planting the root crops and the cover crops? Kansas State University is in my district, and it's a huge agricultural research facility. And We have a grain science program that brings people into our country and they study with us and learn about foods and stuff. I'm sure that there's something you could learn from us, but I know you're very advanced in research and all of your production seems very upscale. I also would just put in a note that Kansas State University just completed the building of the National Bioagri Defense Facility, which is going to replace Plum Island facility for research for zoonotic diseases. And so that is a New York thing. We're trading with New York, bringing the research to Kansas. Was quite an interesting controversy. We started working on this in 1996. So it's been a long time coming. The facility has been built and we're in the commissioning process now. But we're going to study plant and animal diseases. Really our thrust right now has been food security and water security from outside threats and outside diseases. So I hope that some of you will come and study at Kansas State. And I'd love to come to visit your country. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Elrid.
Yeah, well, what I would recommend is what Russ said earlier, you know, maybe the biomethane production in large parts publicly funded, of course, but this you could have a look at, or maybe the crop insurance for you.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much. We covered so many issues and only very superficially, and we need to dig a lot deeper. So this is the start of a conversation, I think, and not the end. There were more questions, I mean, more specific questions in the Q&A, also asking about certification for organic produce, many more issues, but we can't cover them all today. But we will continue working on agricultural issues, both at the Aspen Institute and at ACG. But Russ, you wanted to come in?
I just wanted to say one thing. It was a pretty profound quote from my friend Lars, who is a German farmer. And I'll never forget it, but I shared it with y'all there on the screen. He said, a man who is hungry has one problem. A man who is not hungry has many problems. And I thought that was very profound, and I will never forget that. I thought y'all would like to hear that.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so very much. And last but not least, as I mentioned in the beginning, we also at the German Aspen Institute, we are just starting with our Future Forum Farming initiative. And the first year is going to focus on Brandenburg, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, Sachsen, and in the US side on the whole Midwest. And farmers can still, and ranchers can still apply for this as well. So if you know anybody who would like to participate, send them over to us. We would love to have them. And we are going to post a link in the chat in a second and also send it around. So the application process is still open. But let me thank you once again very, very much for taking the time being here today, sharing your insights with us, sharing what the challenges are, of which there are many, but also sharing best practices and solutions with us. And we hope to continue the conversation. And the link to our project has been just posted in the Q&A. So thank you once again. And I would, last but not least, I would like to hand back to Rob from ACG.
I didn't realize I was going to be on the screen again.
Oh, sorry, but I thought you also wanted
No problem. I guess, again, I'll just extend a great big thanks to all of you from the American Council on Germany. Really appreciate, again, you all taking the time to join us today. And we will follow up with all of you. This was a great conversation, and I hope we were able to build some connections between all of you, and we'll continue to facilitate that in the future. whether it's with the ACG or with the Aspen Institute Germany. So thank you, everybody, for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much. Good night
Thank-
or good day. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.